Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The night was pouring hard over downtown Chicago when Maya Tran's old Honda skidded to a stop near the intersection. The streetlights flickered against the rain, and in the middle of the slick road, a black SUV had crashed headfirst into a lamppost. Steam hissed from its hood. Without thinking, Maya ran toward it, her shoes splashing through puddles. Inside, the driver was unconscious, blood streaking down his temple. "Hey! Sir, can you hear me?" she shouted, fumbling with the jammed door. The handle gave way with a metallic creak. She pulled the man free just as a spark flashed from the engine. They collapsed on the curb, breathless, her hands trembling as sirens wailed faintly in the distance. When she pressed his wrist for a pulse, her fingers brushed against a ring, a silver band engraved with tiny letters she could barely read. A ring and a name tag clipped to his torn jacket, Adrian Hale. It meant nothing to her, just another stranger on a stormy night. She wrapped her worn denim jacket around him to keep him warm until the ambulance arrived. Hours later, at the hospital, she signed her name as the witness on the accident form, her clothes still soaked. The nurse thanked her, but Maya only nodded. She was too tired to feel heroic. By dawn, she returned to her tiny rented room above a diner, where a pile of unpaid bills waited on the table and her mother's medical invoice blinked red on her phone screen. She whispered to herself, "One good deed does not pay rent, Maya." Still, something about the man's face lingered in her mind, the faint calmness even in pain, the way he had murmured one broken word before losing consciousness. Ring. Days later, while serving coffee during the morning rush, the television above the counter flickered with a headline: Adrian Hale, CEO of Hale Systems, hospitalized after mysterious crash. The photo on the screen made her freeze. It was him, the stranger from the wreck. The cup in her hand trembled, spilling hot liquid over her fingers. Her coworker shouted, "Maya, are you okay?" but she barely heard. She just stared at the ringed man on the screen and whispered, "What have I gotten myself into?" That night, a black car stopped outside the diner. A woman in a gray suit stepped out, tall, cold, and purposeful. "Maya Tran?" she asked. "Mr. Hale would like to see you. He says you saved his life." In that moment, Maya had no idea that the man she dragged from the wreck would soon offer her something even more impossible than gratitude, a marriage contract that would change everything. The rain had stopped by the time Maya stood in front of the tall glass hospital building later that evening. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement like fractured mirrors, and her heart pounded as she followed the woman in the gray suit through the automatic doors. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and expensive flowers. They rode the elevator in silence until the woman finally said, "Mr. Hale insists on speaking to you personally. He does not usually do that." Maya's palms were sweating. She felt completely out of place among the white marble floors and the muted elegance of the private wing. When the doors opened, a nurse greeted them and led her into a quiet room. Adrian Hale lay propped against white pillows, pale but alert. His left arm was bandaged, and there was a faint line of stitches above his eyebrow. The glow from the city filtered through the blinds, casting faint stripes across his face. For a long moment, he simply studied her. "You are Maya Tran," he said softly, his voice rough from medication. "You were there that night." She nodded quickly. "I just did what anyone would have done." His gaze lingered on the worn denim jacket folded in her arms. "You gave this to me," he said. "I remember the smell of rain and smoke." Maya shifted uneasily. "You do not have to thank me. I am just glad you are okay." But instead of gratitude, his expression turned serious. "You may have saved my life, but you also witnessed something that complicates mine." He gestured to the woman in the suit. "This is Elise Garner, my attorney. She will explain." Elise stepped forward, her tone crisp. Mr. Hale's accident has triggered a corporate clause that could transfer control of his company to the board unless he is legally married within the week. The clause was designed by his late father to ensure family stability. Maya blinked. What does that have to do with me? Adrian's eyes met hers again. Everything. The media already knows about the crash. If I appear in public with a stranger who rescued me, it will calm speculation. And if that stranger happens to be my wife, the board cannot touch my shares. She stared at him in disbelief. You want to marry me? Not in the romantic sense, he said quietly. Think of it as a business arrangement. You would have full financial security for 6 months, a salary, and your mother's hospital bills paid in full. After that, we can end it quietly. The room went silent except for the steady beeping of the monitor. Maya's mind spun. It was absurd. But the memory of the red overdue notice on her phone and her mother's labored breathing replayed in her head. Elise slid a folder onto the table. The terms are simple. No physical expectations, no press interviews, no interference in his work. In return, full legal protection and compensation. Maya looked at Adrian, his calm eyes betraying something deeper: fatigue, loneliness, perhaps even guilt. Why me? She whispered. Because you are the only one I can trust right now, he said. Everyone else around me wants something. She laughed softly, half incredulous. And what if I say no? Then the people who tried to drive me off that bridge will win, he replied. And I will lose everything my parents built. The weight of his words hung between them. Finally, Maya exhaled, feeling the tremor in her chest. 6 months? He nodded. 6 months. She reached for the pen. Her hand shook as she signed, unaware that the ink she pressed into paper would rewrite both their lives. Elise gathered the papers briskly. Congratulations, she said flatly. You are now Mrs. Hale. The words did not sink in until Maya caught her reflection in the glass wall behind them, her drenched hair, her tired eyes, and the faint glimmer of the hospital lights dancing on the silver ring Adrian placed in her palm. It was the same one she had found that night on the road. As she slipped it onto her finger, she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Outside, the city continued to hum, unaware that a waitress and a billionaire had just signed the most impossible contract of their lives. The next morning, Maya woke up to the sound of knocking on her apartment door. When she opened it, 2 assistants stood in the hallway, neatly dressed and holding a folder. Good morning, Mrs. Hale, one of them said politely. The title felt foreign on her ears. We are here to help you relocate to Mr. Hale's residence as per the agreement. Within an hour, her small room above the diner looked emptier than ever. She packed her mother's framed photo, a few clothes, and her sketchbook, the only things that truly belonged to her. As the car drove through the gated entrance of Hale Manor, she could hardly believe it was real. The mansion loomed over acres of trimmed gardens, its marble steps gleaming under the morning sun. Inside, everything was silent except for the echo of her footsteps on the polished floor. Elise, the attorney, met her in the foyer. This will be your room. Dinner is served at 7. Try to look the part, she said with a faint smirk before walking away. Maya stood alone, staring at her reflection in the massive Marora waitress turned wife overnight. In her new room, a wardrobe full of designer dresses waited, all tagged with her name. She traced the fabric, feeling both fascinated and suffocated. When evening came, she joined Adrian in the dining hall, a room so large her voice would have echoed if she spoke. He was already seated at the far end of the table, dressed in a dark suit, expression unreadable. The meal was silent except for the clinking of silverware. Finally, she broke the tension. So, how does this work? Do I call you Mr. Hale or Adrian? He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time that night. Adrian is fine, he said quietly. And you? Maya, she replied. But I guess you already know that. He almost smiled. Yes, I do. The faint warmth in his tone startled her. For a moment, they sat there, two strangers bound by ink and obligation, pretending it was normal. When dinner ended, Adrian stood. There are rules you should remember. No visitors, no media contact, and always be by my side during public events. This marriage is not for affection, but appearances. She nodded. Understood. As he turned to leave, she added softly, "You can trust me, Adrian. I will not embarrass you." He paused at the doorway. "It is not embarrassment I fear, Maya. It is attachment." The words lingered long after he left. That night, she walked through the empty halls, the chandeliers dimmed to a golden haze. The silence felt heavy, almost lonely. She found herself in a small library lined with dusty books and framed photographs. One picture caught her eye: Adrian standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a confident smile. Both wore identical silver rings. Maya traced the edge of the frame, noticing the engraving on the plaque: Grace Hale. His late wife. Her chest tightened as she realized the ring she wore might once have symbolized something sacred. She slipped it off and placed it on the table, staring at its dull reflection under the lamp. "I am just a placeholder," she whispered. But even as she said it, she felt the faint tremor of something else: curiosity, maybe even empathy for the man whose life she had accidentally stepped into. Down the hall, Adrian stood by his window, watching the same rain begin to fall again. In his hand was the other ring from that photograph, the twin to hers. He turned it over between his fingers and said under his breath, "Do not get used to her, Hale. This is business." But deep down, he already knew that nothing about this arrangement felt like business anymore. Days passed inside the grand house that felt more like a museum than a home. Maya learned to move quietly, as if afraid to disturb the echo of her own footsteps. A stylist arrived every morning, preparing her for etiquette training, media posture, and event rehearsals. "Smile without showing too much teeth, keep your shoulders back, do not cross your legs in photos," the instructor repeated. At first, Maya laughed, but the endless corrections drained her. Still, she kept going, reminding herself this was the price of her mother's health. One afternoon, Adrian returned home early from the office. He found her in the garden, struggling to balance a tray of tea for the staff. "You do not have to do that," he said. She smiled faintly. "Old habits. I feel strange letting others serve me." His eyes softened, but he quickly masked it. "You will need to get used to being served. Appearances matter." She nodded, though something in her chest twisted at his words. That evening, as she dressed for their first public event together, a formal charity gala, Maya felt her pulse race. Elise adjusted her diamond necklace and whispered, "Remember, you are Mrs. Hale now. Every eye in the room will be watching for cracks." At the gala, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and murmured wealth. The moment they entered, flashes erupted from every direction. Adrian's hand rested lightly on her back, a gesture rehearsed for the cameras. "Stay close," he murmured. Maya smiled through the questions and compliments, her voice steady though her palms were slick with nerves. But then a guest, an older investor with too much champagne in his system, leaned toward her and said loudly, "So this is the waitress everyone is talking about. Adrian, you truly have a generous heart." Laughter rippled around them. Maya's cheeks burned, but before she could speak, Adrian's hand tightened around hers. His jaw flexed. "You are mistaken," he said evenly. "My wife may have served tables once, but tonight she represents my family. You will show her respect." The man stammered an apology, and the crowd fell silent. Maya looked up at Adrian, startled by the quiet fury behind his calm. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupted softly. "No one talks down to you while you wear my ring." The rest of the night blurred into music and polite conversations. When they finally left, the car ride home was silent until Maya said, "You defended me." Adrian kept his eyes on the road. "Do not read too much into it. Protecting my reputation means protecting yours." She smiled faintly. Then we are even. I saved your life, and you saved my dignity. His lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Perhaps. Back at the mansion, she kicked off her heels and laughed quietly to herself. For the first time, the house did not feel so cold. Upstairs, Adrian loosened his tie, looking at her reflection in the mirror as she walked past his doorway. For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something neither contract nor logic could explain. Later that night, Maya stood on the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the hill. She touched the ring on her finger and whispered, this was supposed to be pretend. But deep inside, she already feared it was becoming real. Inside his study, Adrian poured himself a drink, staring at the same silver band on his hand. The rain began again, soft and rhythmic against the windows, as if the sky itself was reminding them that no contract could control the heart. The morning after the gala, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Hale Manor, painting the marble floors in soft gold. Maya woke to the faint hum of the city below, her thoughts still tangled from the night before. She had replayed Adrian's words again and again. "No one talks down to you while you wear my ring." He had said it like a promise, but also like a warning. At breakfast, the table was already set. Adrian sat at the far end, reading the paper, the tension from the previous night lingering like static in the air. "Good morning," she said carefully. He glanced up, his eyes tired but gentle. "Morning. How are you feeling after last night?" "Like someone tried to turn me into a headline," she said with a wry smile. He chuckled softly. "You handled yourself well." "So did you," she replied. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, just strangely full. For the first time, it felt like they were two people sharing space, not two signatures on a contract. After breakfast, Adrian's driver appeared at the door. "Mr. Hale, the board meeting starts in 1 hour." He stood, gathering his jacket, then hesitated. "Maya, there is a company dinner next week. It would mean a lot if you came." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that part of the contract?" He smiled faintly. "Let us call it a personal request." When he left, the mansion seemed emptier than usual. Maya wandered into the study, drawn to the photographs on the wall. She paused in front of one showing Adrian as a teenager, standing beside a man who looked stern but proud, his father. A small plaque below read Daniel Hale, founder of Hale Systems. She whispered, "So this is the legacy you are fighting to protect." That evening, she found Elise waiting for her in the sitting room. The lawyer's tone was sharp, eyes calculating. "Enjoying your new life, Mrs. Hale?" "I am learning," Maya replied calmly. Elise stepped closer. "Do not get comfortable. This arrangement is temporary. Adrian has responsibilities you cannot begin to understand." "Maybe," Maya said softly, "but I do understand gratitude." Elise smirked. "Gratitude does not last forever. When this contract ends, so will your fairy tale." With that, she left. The words stung more than Maya wanted to admit. Later that night, unable to sleep, Maya walked downstairs and found Adrian in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "You are awake too?" he asked. She nodded. "Could not sleep. Your lawyer stopped by." "Elise?" He sighed. "She means well. She thinks protecting me means controlling everything." Maya leaned against the counter. "Do you ever get tired of being protected?" He looked up at her, surprised by the question. "Every day." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, they simply stood there, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Then Adrian said quietly, "Come with me." He led her to the back patio where the night air was cool and the city lights flickered below. "This is the only place I can breathe," he said. "Out here, I am not the CEO. I am just a man trying to remember what life felt like before everything became a performance." Maya looked at him, really looked at him, not as the man she had signed a contract with, but as someone who carried too much on his shoulders. "Maybe you need someone to remind you," she said. He met her gaze, the distance between them dissolving. "Maybe I do." For the first time, Adrian reached for her hand. It was not scripted, not part of the agreement. It was real, fragile, and terrifying. The night was quiet except for the wind moving through the trees. Maya felt her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from recognition, the kind that whispered this was no longer pretend. And when Adrian finally said, "Thank you for being here," she knew he was not talking about the contract anymore. The following week arrived with gray skies and a restless chill in the air. Maya dressed carefully for the company dinner Adrian had mentioned, choosing a dark blue dress that felt elegant but still hers. When she came downstairs, Adrian was already waiting in a tailored black suit. For a moment, the way he looked at her made her forget the world outside. "You look perfect," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. The drive to the Hale Systems headquarters was quiet, filled only with the hum of the city. When they arrived, cameras flashed as soon as the car door opened. Adrian offered his arm, and she took it, trying to ignore the reporters calling her name. Inside, the dinner unfolded in a ballroom filled with glass and steel, modern and cold. The board members smiled politely, but Maya could feel their judgment beneath every glance. Halfway through the evening, Elise appeared, whispering something to Adrian that made his jaw tighten. "Excuse me," he said, rising from the table. Minutes passed. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. "Everything all right?" Maya asked. "Just business," he said, though his eyes told a different story. As the night went on, she noticed how the tension in him grew. At the end of the dinner, one of the board members, Mr. Voss, raised a glass. "To our brilliant CEO and his new wife. May this union bring stability and perhaps less gossip." Laughter followed, forced and sharp. Adrian smiled politely, but his grip on Maya's hand was firm, almost protective. Later, as they left the building, thunder rumbled in the distance. The air was thick, electric. In the car, Adrian's phone buzzed with messages. He ignored them. "You do not owe them explanations," Maya said quietly. "You have nothing to prove." He looked at her, his voice low. "You would be surprised how much of my life has been about proving something." She reached for his hand. "You do not have to with me." The storm broke before they reached home. Rain hammered against the windshield, lightning illuminating the road. Suddenly, the car in front of them braked hard. Adrian swerved, narrowly avoiding a collision. The car skidded to the shoulder, stopping with a jolt. "Are you all right?" he asked, breathing hard. Maya nodded, heart racing. "I think so." For a long moment, they sat in the quiet aftermath, the rain drumming steadily above them. Then Adrian let out a shaky laugh. "Seems like fate likes testing us with storms." Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe it is reminding us how we met." He looked at her, and this time there was no distance in his eyes, no walls. "That night, when you pulled me out of the wreck, I thought I saw an angel. I thought it was a dream." Her breath caught. "You are awake now," she said softly. He leaned closer, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Very awake." The moment hung between them, fragile and electric, until the driver cleared his throat awkwardly. They both laughed, breaking the spell. When they arrived home, Adrian stopped her before she went upstairs. "Maya," he said. She turned. "Yes?" "I meant what I said earlier. I do not want this to be just business anymore." Her chest tightened. "Then what do you want it to be?" He hesitated, searching for words, then said quietly, "Something real." She did not answer, but her smile said enough. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the rain fade into silence, she realized her heart had already crossed the line their contract had drawn. And somewhere down the hall, Adrian sat awake in his study, staring at the same contract, knowing that what had begun as a legal safeguard had become the most dangerous thing of all: love. The following morning, the calm after the storm did not last long. Maya woke to the sound of voices downstairs, urgent, sharp, unfamiliar. When she entered the hall, Adrian was surrounded by reporters, microphones flashing, questions flying like arrows. "Mr. Hale, is it true your marriage was arranged for business reasons? Did you pay your wife to protect your company?" Maya froze at the edge of the marble steps, every eye turning toward her. Adrian's face was tense, his jaw locked. Elise stood nearby, her expression unreadable. "That is enough," Adrian said firmly, escorting Maya past the crowd as security pushed them out. Inside the car, she could barely breathe. "They know," she whispered. "Someone leaked the contract." Adrian nodded grimly. It was not an accident. His phone buzzed again, another headline flashing across the screen: "Fake marriage scandal rocks Hale systems." "This is going to destroy you," Maya said. "It will not," he replied quietly. "But it might destroy us." Back at the mansion, Elise was waiting. "I told you this would happen," she snapped. "The board is furious. They are calling for an emergency vote to remove you as CEO." Adrian's voice stayed calm but cold. "Find out who leaked it." She hesitated, then added, "You should distance yourself from her. The optics are bad." "No," he said. "She stays." Maya stepped forward. "Adrian, she is right. I cannot let you lose everything because of me." "You are not the problem," he said, his eyes dark. "Greed is." That night, the house felt smaller, suffocating. Maya sat by the window, watching rain blur the city lights again, the same rain that had brought him into her life. Her phone buzzed with messages from unknown numbers, strangers calling her names, accusing her of being a gold digger, a liar. She turned it off and buried her face in her hands. Minutes later, Adrian appeared in the doorway, his tie loose, his expression weary. "Maya," he said softly. "Do you regret it?" she asked without looking up. "Regret what?" "Saying yes to this, whatever this is." He crossed the room, kneeling beside her. "Not for a second." She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Even if it costs you everything?" He smiled faintly. "You already cost me everything the moment I started caring." She let out a shaky laugh. "That is not funny." "I am not joking," he said. "I meant it when I told you this is not business anymore." Before she could respond, his phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It is Voss," he muttered, stepping into the hallway. Maya listened from the doorway, catching fragments of his words: evidence, sabotage, not over. When he hung up, his expression had changed. "The board meeting is tomorrow," he said quietly. "They will try to strip my shares. But I think I finally know who set up that crash." Her eyes widened. "You mean the accident?" He nodded. "It was never an accident." The air between them grew heavy with truth and fear. Adrian took her hand, his voice steady. "No matter what happens tomorrow, do not believe what they say about us. I know who you are, Maya." She squeezed his hand, whispering, "Then let me stand beside you." In that moment, the woman who once served tables and the man who once ruled skyscrapers became equals, two people ready to face the storm together. The next day dawned gray and heavy with tension. Hale Systems headquarters buzzed with reporters and security guards as the emergency board meeting began. Inside the glass-walled conference room, Adrian stood at the head of the long table, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. Maya watched from the doorway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The board members whispered among themselves until Mr. Voss, the senior vice president, rose from his seat. "Mr. Hale," he began with a thin smile, "we appreciate your presence despite the recent scandals. However, the board has decided that your marriage to Miss Mrs. Hale has damaged the company's image beyond repair. We are voting today to remove you as CEO." Adrian's gaze never wavered. Before you do, I suggest you watch something. He tapped a button on the remote, and the lights dimmed. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life, showing footage from the night of the car crash. The dashcam footage from his vehicle displayed everything: the black sedan that had swerved deliberately into his lane, the impact, the spark of metal, and the darkness that followed. Gasps filled the room. Adrian's voice was steady. This video was recovered from my backup system. The car that hit me was registered under Voss's assistant's name. The payment for that vehicle came from a Shell account linked to your company, Voss. The man's face turned pale. This is absurd, he stammered. You are accusing me without proof. Adrian stepped closer. That is the proof. And I am filing charges for attempted murder and corporate sabotage. The room erupted in murmurs. Elise, standing in the corner, looked stunned. Voss's hands trembled as security stepped forward. You cannot do this, he shouted. You will regret it. Adrian looked directly at him. I already regret trusting you. As the guards escorted Voss out, silence settled over the room. Then one of the older board members cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, on behalf of the board, I owe you an apology. Adrian nodded but said nothing. Instead, he turned toward the door where Maya stood. There is one more thing, he said. The woman the press has mocked for days, she is the one who saved my life that night. Without her, none of us would be standing here. Every camera in the room swung toward Maya. Her cheeks flushed, but she stood tall. Adrian continued, his voice softer now. What began as a contract became something far greater. Maya reminded me that a company without integrity is nothing. And a life without love is even less. The journalists in the back lowered their cameras, moved by the sincerity in his tone. For the first time, Maya saw Adrian not as a businessman but as a man reclaiming his soul. When the meeting ended, Adrian reached for her hand. It is over, he said quietly, the truth is out. She smiled through tears. Then let us go home. As they stepped outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds. Reporters still shouted questions, but Adrian ignored them. He looked at Maya, his voice gentle but sure. I am done hiding. You are my wife, and I am proud of it. The crowd fell silent, cameras flashing like falling stars around them. In that instant, the storm that had haunted them both finally began to clear. Weeks passed, and the chaos surrounding the scandal slowly faded into memory. Hale Systems recovered its reputation, stronger than before, and Adrian's leadership was praised for its transparency and courage. But for Maya, the world had changed in quieter, deeper ways. She was no longer the girl who waited tables to survive. She was the woman who had walked through storms and learned what real strength looked like. One afternoon, sunlight streamed through the glass walls of Adrian's office as she brought him coffee, a small smile playing on her lips. You still forget to eat when you work, she teased. He looked up, his eyes softening. And you still think you need to take care of me. Someone has to, she said. He laughed, setting aside his papers. You know, you could work here officially. The company's foundation needs someone with your heart. I do not want a job because of you, she said honestly. Then take it because of what you believe in, he replied. You once told me that kindness is a choice. Help me build something that lasts. The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. She nodded. All right, but only if you promise to eat lunch every day. Deal, he said, standing to take her hand. That evening, they attended the opening of the Bridge Night Foundation, named after the place where they first met. The hall was filled with people from every walk of life, workers, students, volunteers, all gathered because one man and one woman had turned tragedy into hope. On the stage, Adrian addressed the crowd. A year ago, I nearly lost everything, he said. But sometimes, life breaks you only to rebuild you stronger. The woman beside me reminded me that wealth means nothing without compassion. Tonight, we dedicate this foundation to every person who believes that one act of kindness can change a life. The audience applauded as Maya stepped forward, her eyes glistening. After the event, they walked outside together, the city skyline glowing in the distance. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "Every day," Adrian said. "It started with a crash and a stranger who refused to look away. And it led me here too, the only thing that feels real." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maya froze. "Adrian," he opened it, revealing a new silver ring, engraved on the inside with the words, "Keep choosing us." "The first ring was part of a contract," he said quietly. "This one is a promise. No more signatures, no more conditions, just us." Her breath trembled. "You are serious?" "Completely," he said. "Marry me again, for real this time." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they both laughed through the emotion that swelled between them. The wind carried the sound of distant traffic and laughter from the gala hall behind them, but for that moment, the world felt still. Adrian whispered, "You turned my life into something worth living." Maya smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you turned my mistake into my miracle." The camera of the world might have forgotten their story, but for them, it was only beginning proof that sometimes, the most unreal love begins with a contract and ends with a promise.